Okay, so I need to start with an apology. My MacBook had some sort of meltdown yesterday and decided that it was just not going to have any audio whatsoever. So I couldn't record, I couldn't do playback, nothing. And I spent several hours troubleshooting, and it finally came right at about 11 o'clock last night. I don't think it was actually anything I did. I think it was just the MacBook being contrite and going, okay, I've just wasted your entire afternoon and evening, so here you go, you can have your audio back. So naturally, 11 o'clock, I was like, damn this, and I went straight to bed. So no video last night. Then this morning, I was busy working on other stuff, so I couldn't do a live stream. And also, I wasn't prepared for a live stream because normally I would prepare for the live stream the evening beforehand, but I was so busy messing around with this stupid MacBook. Now, I've got a stack of notes for this video, but they're notes that I made prior to wanting to start this yesterday. I had it all figured out in my head yesterday, having messed around last night with the audio and been busy doing other things today. I'm not sure that I actually remember what it was or all the significant things, so I think I'm going to be winging it a bit with this video, so bear with me. I do think this is something important that needs to be discussed, so I'm going to push on. I just don't know if I'm going to be quite as eloquent or quite as together as I would have been last night had I recorded it then. Now, back when Lily and Jack first went missing, I made a comment on my channel that we had the Summer Wells crowd covering this case. I'm not the Summer Wells crowd. I was Kylie Rodney, Maddie Soto. They're my two main ones since beginning my channel. I didn't have a channel when Summer first went missing, and mostly I followed Josh on the lab with Summer's case. But a lot of the channels who started covering this case at the beginning had covered Summer Wells' case. And I referred to them as the Summer Wells crowd. And I commented on the fact that the Summer Wells case had been a bit of a circus, and that a lot of people had stopped following it because it had become quite a circus. Now, I know that Sunny and Justin also covered Summer's case, and I know that when Sunny heard me refer to the Summer Wells crowd, she was a bit baffled. I wasn't necessarily referring to her or Justin. I was referring to the likes of Dolly Vision, and he's not covering this case anymore, he's moved on. But I need to explain what I was talking about first, because I think it applies here in this video. And it's something that essentially started out with Summer Wells' case, and it's carried over to this case. This is not something that happens with every case. It's something that happened with Summer Wells' case, and you had a core group of content creators who decided it was a way to go and continued doing it. And that is this thing of talking directly with people connected to a case as a YouTube content creator. And there's a good side and a bad side to it. If you're doing it as someone who is eyes wide open, you've covered plenty of cases, and you're not likely to buy any soggy bread from people, then well and good. If it is something that is going to help develop an understanding of the case. But the problem with the Summer Wells case was that you had content creators who were doing that sort of thing. They were doing credible interviews with people like, if you look at Chris McDonough, he did an interview with Candace, with Don Wells, with Hunter and his mother, and I can't remember her name, Ali. He did a lot of interviews with the people who were at the centre of the case. And his interviews weren't anyone trying to sell a story. He was asking them questions on camera. We could hear the audio. we could choose for ourselves what we believed in. Ironically, back then people were critical of Chris for actually interviewing people connected to the case. And yet we look at this case and it seems like every man and his dog has been doing the same thing. But back then, it wasn't so common. Now, I thought it was great what Chris did because it was on camera. We were able to see what was going on. We were able to make our own assessments in terms of how truthful people were being. But following on from that, suddenly what happened was that other content creators thought, hey, look at all the attention Chris got from talking to these people connected to the case. And suddenly people were talking to people behind the scenes and then coming forward without receipts and sharing information that Fred Hill gave. And like, who the heck is Fred Hill? And don't worry if you're not following the references to the people. I'm just trying to give you a feel of what was going on with Summer's case because we've gone down the same track. Basically, you've had people who've come at it from an angle of, we are going to do credible interviews with people, we are going to show receipts, so you're going to hear the audio of that person speaking, or you may even see that person speaking, and we're going to keep it on the level. But then over time, what has happened is that even people who've started off that way have had conversations in the background with people, and these people have said, well, we don't want our voice on audio, or we don't want you to share our messages. So then these people come forward and they're just relaying what they've heard. So now we're playing Chinese whispers. And we're already starting to lose the facts because everyone perceives things in a different way. I could explain something to you about a situation that occurred. You're not going to take in every single thing that I tell you. So when you go and tell it to someone else, it's going to change a bit. And that's what started happening here. We had people coming forward speaking to content creators who probably were credible people. And then the content creators were sharing the information. And suddenly we've gone from a situation of hearing it and possibly seeing it for ourselves, where we can do our own analysis, we can listen to the exact words they're saying, or we can look at their facial expressions and decide for ourselves if what they're saying is BS. Suddenly we go from that to having a second-hand story. It is now hearsay. We are relying on that person not just to get the information correct that was given to them, but for them to have made that assessment themselves in terms of credibility, for them to have the capacity to recognise if someone is being deceptive, or to read their body language, their facial language, whatever, and realise if they are being deceptive. You may even have the added element of them saying, I was told this, but not telling you who told them, so you can't even assess if the person that told them is someone that you deem to be credible. Now, for me, as a content creator and also as someone who's been around for a very long time in terms of this true crime thing, if I were listening to Sunny's channel and she was giving a recount of something that somebody had told her, then I would feel fairly confident in her capacity to weed out the BS. I would feel confident that she's been around long enough and heard enough that she's not necessarily going to come forward with something that is completely made up from someone, because she's going to do a lot of the critical thinking while she's listening. However, even then, I'm having to rely on another person to decide if the information is credible, to decide if their informant is credible. But I can at least recognise, having been around for quite some time, I can recognise that Sunny has the experience. So even if she's not necessarily naming someone up or playing audio directly, then I will consider what she's saying. I won't buy it 100% because I'm not hearing it for myself, but I will consider it. The problem arises with this case when you have people starting to believe that it is the norm for a content creator to speak to someone behind the scenes and report the information that they've gotten without bringing receipts. Because if you're fairly new to this, you may see Sunny popping up and talking about information that she was given from Durwood. And you may think, okay, this is normal. So if I speak to someone behind the scenes, or if this content creator speaks to someone behind the scenes and shares the information, that's just normal and we just accept it. And then all of a sudden you have rookies coming out and saying, I have this information, and they haven't stopped to consider that the person giving the information is far more concerned with making sure that people understand that she has a brand new BMW, or is basically providing receipts by way of saying, well, I've made a sworn statement to the RCMP. And suddenly this person is reporting everything that's been said by this individual without actually stopping to consider this person's motives, without stopping to consider their credibility, without asking for receipts, and without doing any research. There's this belief that a lot of people get that if someone tells them that they are connected to somebody, they're just going to believe it and take that as validation for everything that they say. And I've seen this on so many cases where people who are fairly new to the true crime scene have done this. And then we've discovered later on that it was all a load of BS. My favourite is the deathbed confessions. I've seen these on the Kylie Rodney case. I've seen these on the Madeline Soto case. I think there may have even been one at one point in time with this case. I'm not sure. But that's one of my favourites because it's always the, oh, this person, they've just got a conscience, so they're going to share this information. Well, they have this vague connection to somebody connected to the case, but apparently they have all the inside knowledge. But people think because they say, oh, this person knows such and such, that they're telling the truth. Now, I am going to back up a bit shortly and go deeper into everything that I'm saying here, but I'm just kind of trying to provide the framework for what I'm discussing in this video, and that is how easy it is for misinformation to be spread, how easy it is for things to be provided without receipts and be considered as solid factual knowledge. If I'm listening to someone and they're saying, oh, well, this person said this, and I listened to them and I didn't hear any deceit in what they were saying, I trust them, blah, 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 I have to take their word for that because I haven't heard that person speaking? No, I don't. I can question what they are telling me and question the motive of the person who gave them this information, allegedly. Because that way I'm probably going to get closer to the truth than a lot of other people who just blindly accept what they're being told. So I'm going to move into some more tangible stuff, and I will explain where this is coming from shortly. So this is a post from Chaucer that was made yesterday, I think it was. Why is it whenever we get new clarification in regards to Jack and Lily Sullivan's disappearance case, does it seem it's always to address or correct stories that have been circulating for months? And how is it that we still end up with more questions than before the corrections were made? At least I know I do. The new statements made remove credibility of some people while giving it to others, even if the credibility was not intentionally given. Just my thoughts in regards to the newly released information. And therein lies the problem. Now, when I was going to school, there was this game that, I don't know if it's played in other countries, but in Australia it was one of those games where the PE teacher hadn't really made any preparation for that lesson, or they just wanted to get the crazies out of the kids. So it was that ship game where you would all start in the middle of the gym and then they would yell starboard or port or one of those, and you had to run in the correct direction depending on what they said. And of course the last person over the line was out. I must admit I hated this game because as someone with ADHD, there was always that little bit of processing time first before I could figure out which direction to head off into. I never really memorised which was starboard or port or all these things like that. So I basically had to, in my mind, try and figure it out or wait till people started moving and then move in the direction with them and hope they were right. And that's what this case feels like. It's like someone comes out with a little bit of information, everyone goes after that information. But then someone else comes out and gives a new bit of information that actually completely obliterates what we've already been told and contradicts the last bit of information. And then people decide that that's truthful. And nobody ever stops and says, well, hang on, there's a problem here because we're being given different information that contradicts what we've already been told. How are we supposed to know who's telling the truth? But instead, people just blindly accept it. And then you get content creators saying, this is a person I trust. And so many people believe that as well and go, okay, well, if this content creator is telling me they trust them, they must be trustworthy. So then suddenly that little bit of information becomes the latest factual information when all it is hearsay. We don't know if it's truthful. We don't know if the information we had before that this bit of information is contradicting was closer to the truth. But people run with the new information and turn around and say, well, such and such lied. Or, well, such and such must have been close to the truth. Even though previously they've said, well, that person has got a motive and I think they're lying and I don't buy their story. One of the other big things in terms of blindly accepting information is that people seem to forget to question alliances. So someone comes forward and says, I have information from this person. And people just blindly accept it and they don't stop and look at who that person is aligned with. And if the person they're aligned with, is that someone who is truthful, or is it someone who in the past has been proven to be a liar? So the things I'm going to hone in on now, all separately of course, are the new information that's come out from Cindy, the concerns I have about that, the information that's coming out from this Anita person, and also an issue that I'm seeing consistently on Facebook. Because it seems to me that right now there are a number of people trying to spin narratives. And they are doing that via Facebook, they are doing that via YouTubers. You have YouTubers who are keen to be top dog. So they're having conversations with people who are closely connected to the case and reporting back with the information they've got. But the problem is, you've got two ways of doing this. You can do what Mike Darman has done and produce the audio from that person. So he's had a conversation with Janie McKenzie, quite a long conversation with Janie McKenzie, and he's been gradually letting out all the audio from that. Well, that is solid, because we can listen to it, we can listen to what she's saying, and we can figure out her motives, we can figure out if she's being deceptive. But on the other hand, you've got Shenanigans coming out and saying she's had a conversation with Cindy and Cheryl, and she finds them to be 100% trustworthy, and this is the information that she's been given from them. We don't get to make a judgment on whether they're being deceptive or not with their information, other than working from hearsay information. We're not even getting it verbatim, we are getting a retelling of information. So like I said at the beginning of the video, that's when it starts to become really hard to figure out if the information that's being put out is truthful or if it is someone trying to sell a story. Sure, Shenanigans can say, I trust these people. But we have to look at the alliances. Cheryl, Cindy, and that Angeline seem to have this alliance now. And the problem is that the person at the centre of that alliance is Cheryl, who we have seen lie on countless occasions. She's not someone that I consider to be credible. We also have Cindy, who has been completely silent for 10 months and is now talking to a YouTuber. We have nothing to gauge that information from. We can't listen to Cindy talking, so we can't know from what she's saying if there's signs of deception in her speech. We're just hearing it relayed back to us. But we've got nothing to start from in terms of understanding her level of credibility, other than a content creator telling us, I trust her. How exactly are we supposed to know her level of understanding of deception? It could be that Cindy and Cheryl were just really, really, really nice to her, and so she decided they must be good people and she must trust them. And this isn't a criticism of Shenanigans, this is just me simply saying this is where things are starting to fall apart for us in terms of getting information from this case. We have a content creator who has not covered any other cases, a content creator who maybe has followed other cases, I don't know, but she's a newbie and she's not done this before in terms of listening to the sort of statements, the sort of things that are said by people connected to a case for the purpose of spinning a narrative. So I am not comfortable with just blindly accepting the information that's being given to me here. I mean, even with Sunny, who's been around, I still have to question the credibility of the information. Because, of course, the other thing that happens, which I disagree with, is a content creator has a conversation with someone connected to a case, and because they want to keep that person talking, they come out publicly and say, hey, I trust this person. I believe that what they're telling me, so that they can get more information from this person. The problem with that is that you get people who just blindly accept everything they are told. So if you're having a conversation with someone and you're smelling a rat, but you want to keep that person talking because you know that that's going to get you double the views on your channel from being able to say, hey, look, I've got an exclusive with this person, to me that's really not helping the case, because you are putting out misinformation for the sake of keeping someone talking when you know that that person is not truthful. And the speed at which this misinformation spreads is ridiculous. So it starts to become problematic, especially because after it's gone through a handful of different people, suddenly people decide that it must be something factual that they've heard somewhere credible because everyone's talking about it, so it must be the truth. I've seen cases where one content creator gets information from a slightly dubious source and they put that information out, and another content creator hears it and decides to discuss it on their channel, so they discuss it. And then other content creators go, well, look, these two people have discussed it, so it must be something that I've just missed. And all of a sudden, it's being treated as factual. And you have content creators who decide, well, since these two content creators are covering it, since there's more than one person covering it, I'm going to cover it too. And this is where you get your problems. So I know that content creators have criticised me, said I've been pernickety, etc., when it comes to insisting on receipts. But for me, if we are going to do the right thing with a case, if we are going to be covering the case for the right reasons, for justice, or for, if justice is already happening, just to spread awareness of the case, then we should be doing it ethically, and that involves bringing receipts for our information. So showing screenshots of conversations or playing audio of conversations. Because otherwise, all of a sudden, we have the confusion that we are seeing now with this case, where there is so much information swirling around and nobody seems to know what's truthful and what's not. So with that in mind, let's first of all approach this information that has allegedly come out from Cindy. So the dilemma that a lot of people are having right now is the idea that basically what Cindy has said makes Wade a liar. And we have this comment from Belinda Gray. So to my understanding, Cindy and Cheryl are now saying Wade and the family friend who babysit the little one got it wrong. The truth will come out, and I certainly hope those who covered and lied get charged as well. So to really understand what's going on, let's talk about what it is that Cindy allegedly said. Now, rather than me trying to relay the story back to you, I'm going to work from the transcript from Shenanigan's live stream where she talked about it. Because this is from a transcript, some of it on here isn't quite, the words are a bit wrong. But the first thing we have on the left-hand side is a discussion of that Cindy said that with regards to statements that were said about Malaya being held down, and it's not actually doesn't seem to be addressed here. She said she predominantly saw the kids in the summer and at breaks, and when she'd have the kids, she'd pick them up, and her and Wade would pick the kids up and take them to her place, and she apparently never saw Daniel there. Her presumption was that he was working. Now, put a pin in that comment, because one of the big things people are saying is that Cindy is proving Wade to be a liar. And I'm going to come back to looking at what Wade said in relation to that. So our understanding of the U-Haul story was that Malaya wanted to get out. She told Paddy she wanted out, and that they hired a U-Haul to go and collect her. And that she turned around and said she didn't want to go. Now, the story from Cindy contradicts that. And what Cindy allegedly told Shenanigans is that she suggested they get a U-Haul to bring them back to Paddy's. But Daniel didn't want to do that because it would be too far to go for work. And that he said that they were going to get a place in New Glasgow instead. So, according to Cindy, the U-Haul wasn't about getting Malaya away from Daniel. It was her wanting to move them away because she believed that Lily and Jack were sick because of where they lived. Now remember, this is a transcript. This isn't me saying information that I have personally been given. This is me reading from a transcript. This is what was said by Shenanigans on her channel. So that is a story that she's shared on her channel. She also said that all the people out there saying that she had the opportunity to leave and why didn't she just go in the U-Haul, that's not what the scenario was. I don't buy into saying stuff like that because we don't know if Cindy's being truthful. So we don't know if the U-Haul was for the purpose of moving the whole family back to Paddy's because the children were always sick, or whether it was for the purpose of moving Malaya and the children away from Daniel. All we have is Cindy's story and what people believe is Wade's story. Now she did so, Cindy said, and I quote, "I will rent you a U-Haul if you and Daniel and the kids want to move back to Paddy's because I think the kids are getting sick there." And she's saying that she thinks that's the truth. And she says what Wade said was mansplaining, saying that he got it wrong. So we could take this as 100% correct and just say, okay, well, this is what the story is now. Let's forget about the other story that we heard and decide this is correct because we have someone here saying that this is the correct story. We have someone here saying that Wade just got it wrong because he's a man. I don't know about you, but I see a problem with that. So here's the thing. There's information out there that would certainly raise questions about this story. First of all, in terms of the unredacted information from the documents, we have paragraph 20 of multiple documents where we have a comment that basically, I think Malaya said this, they moved to the trailer on Daniel's mother's property after he had a falling out with her grandmother around August 2023. So why would they be wanting to get a U-Haul to move Daniel and Malaya and the children back to Paddy's when Daniel had had a falling out with Paddy? You would think that they would not be welcome there. So straight up, that causes questions about this story. How could they be considering moving them back to Paddy's place when clearly there's not good blood between Paddy and Daniel? If they moved out because of a falling out with Paddy, I can't see any reasonable person accepting people moving back in with them if that situation has already failed. And I can't see Cindy considering it if that situation has already failed. The other thing here that we need to consider is that Cindy and Daniel never ever got along. So why would she consider wanting to move him into Paddy's with Malaya and the children when she didn't like the guy? And then we had this comment from Wade's daughter where she seems to believe that, well, she seems to have knowledge of abuse in that house. So how would she have knowledge of abuse in that house if Wade and Cindy didn't? and maybe this information came later, but it certainly raises questions, especially when she says, you watched your kids get severely abused and you're trying to throw all this on Daniel when you're just as responsible to remove them from the environment, and you had help from lots to leave. Certainly, the context of what she's saying here makes it sound that people were aware of the situation in that household and that people were offering to help Malaya get out. And then we have this bit of information. Patty offered her the house, but she needed to either go back to school or get a job. When she met Daniel, he told her she wouldn't have to work, so they moved to Janie's. Now, a few issues here. First of all, Patty was selling the house. Now, I don't know when she decided to sell the house, but was that before or after this U-Haul was rented? Because if Patty was already planning on selling the house, why would they have considered moving Daniel and Malaya and the children back to Patty's place? So that also makes no sense. The other thing that makes no sense here is Patty had expectations of Malaya in terms of her being in the house. So if Malaya had been given this offer of you can have the house if you go back to school or get a job, she moves in with Daniel, I'm not sure, I can't see how it would then be acceptable for her and Daniel to then move back in because of a claim that the children were getting sick consistently. Okay, so I've got a few bits of audio that address this situation. I'm not sure if they're going to make things more confusing or clarify things, but you can let me know at the end.
But I asked her, did he hurt you? She didn't really say he hurt her, but he held her down. He held her down and took her phone on her, and she couldn't talk. She couldn't allowed to use the phone.
So we have this information coming out from Connie, and this is something that we've seen in the documents as well that Malaya spoke about. So to me it seems like the family did know. And the thing with Cindy's story is, to me it sounds like someone who is trying to backpedal and make it appear that they had no idea what the situation was in the household. Because obviously for someone who works in the medical profession, she is a mandatory reporter, and it could have an impact on her employment if she is known to have been aware of a situation like this and she didn't report what was going on. So maybe that is what is happening here. Maybe the backtracking is to cover herself, because people have pointed out that in her profession she should have been aware of this thing and she should have done something about it. And there has been a lot of chatter lately in terms of people saying, why didn't people do more? Why didn't people speak up? So could this latest story be an attempt to save face, an attempt to make it appear that she had no idea about what was going on physically with the children? So the question again that arises here with this information from Connie is this something Malaya told her after the children went missing, or is this something that she knew? Because here's the thing, we know that Malaya was closest with Patty. So if she told Connie about what was going on before the children went missing, would she have told Patty also? And then you have the question there that comes up, well, Durwood made these claims that Patty wanted him to go and take Malaya and the children out of the situation because she felt that Jack was being bullied by Daniel and that Jack was getting bruised up and things like that. So we have these claims from Durwood that Paddy wanted him to get Malaya out of there because of the abuse. And now we have Cindy turning around and saying, well, the U-Haul was because we thought it was an environment where the children were becoming unwell. Here's the thing though, the problem with Durwood's story is that it changed repeatedly. The many versions that we have from him is, first of all, there's one version where he only found out about this after the children went missing. There's another version when he was asked before the children went missing to just go and check the situation out. There's another version where him and Paddy allegedly knocked on the door with the U-Haul and Malaya said, I'm not going. Well, Durwood's the least credible person here. So I'm really not putting a lot of weight on any of these things that he's said, but they are something to keep in mind, and I'm going to double back to that very soon.
You don't like the kids. He beats the kids, he beats their daughter.
That's right.
We had to do polygraph and everything. Cause
You did a polygraph too?
Yeah, because we used to drop the kids off over there.
So again, this time we have Wade being quite open about this idea of Daniel being violent with the children. Of course, the problem again is this information that came out after the fact? Or is this information they had before the children went missing and they didn't act on it? Because if they knew beforehand and didn't act on it, then it is quite possible that Cindy would want to come up with a different story to cover her ass. Because as a grandmother, to know that someone is abusing your children and not act on it, that would be a very bad thing. The question that I ask here is, we know that Belinda is going for this guardianship. And I've mentioned it before, but when a judge looks at these sorts of things, they look at the other people connected to the children, and they are going to look at the other grandmother. So regardless of whether or not Cindy wants guardianship or anything, the judge is still going to want to find out what her relationship was like with the children, because it's something that has to be taken into account in terms of closing that door and saying, no, I'm going to give guardianship to Belinda. So could this be a move by Cindy, realising that a judge is going to look at the situation and say, hey, this woman knew that the guy was being abusive and she didn't report it. All she did was try and get a U-Haul, and then when it didn't happen, just forgot the whole situation. So there's a lot of things here that could be motivation for Cindy to come up with this story in the first place. But again, just like Connie, Wade hasn't given an indication here of whether or not they knew this information before the children went missing, or if this may have just come out afterwards, after they took Malaya from that property. Now, as the title of this video suggests, I'm not just addressing one thing, I'm addressing the whole misinformation thing. But I'm going to come back to Cindy in just a moment. But I'm going to take a bit of a segue here. And I want to talk about this person who has popped up on Facebook and has been contacting content creators. This is that Anita person who is allegedly close friends with Sydney, and she made a post on Facebook a week or so back saying that in terms of the story that Durwood put out about Malaya doing a runner to the reserve with Meadow, this woman actually claims that Meadow was in her car driving to the reserve, and that she was approved by CPS as someone to watch over Meadow when Cindy and Wade couldn't. Now, this is the first time we've heard of this. This woman has also been, like I said, in contact with content creators. Now, we had a few weeks ago, Shenanigans was talking about this contact this person that was giving her information, but she didn't want to name them because they're not someone who's been previously named, and she didn't want to make things difficult for them. And she said that she didn't have to produce receipts because this person had given a sworn statement to law enforcement. Well, when I saw this comment by this woman on Facebook, I contacted Belinda, and I said, do you know anything about this woman? I think it's just interesting that she's suddenly appeared. And Belinda said to me, well, I know that she's got connections with Cindy, but I think she's credible. She's given a sworn statement to RCMP. Belinda also told me that this woman had been told by investigators not to speak to content creators. And I thought, well, that's interesting if she's gone and spoken to shenanigans. Anyway, I sent her a message, just a voice message saying, look, I'm curious about this claim you're making about having Meadow in the vehicle. And her response to me was, I can't talk about it, I'm not allowed to talk about it, you know, all that top secret stuff. So I'm like, okay, fair enough, well and good. But then she started reaching out to me again and just making little nuggets, little comments about Malaya and rug use and stuff like that. Not very nice things about Malaya, but also other things, and I'm not going to go into it because I have questions about this individual. Now, one of the messages she sent me was this. She said, Cindy had no clue, never been to trailer. Now, my response to her was, well, that's interesting. Now, I'd forgotten about that audio that we just heard from Wade, where he said they would go and collect the children from the trailer. But I did remember that Janie had said that Cindy had been there a few times. So I said to this woman, well, that's interesting because Janie said this. Well, after that, the only response I got from her was an audio that was from Mike Darman's channel that was Janie speaking and had nothing to do with anything. So maybe this person is credible. Maybe she is close friends with Cindy. But having claimed that she's been told not to speak to anyone, she's been reaching out to a lot of people, giving a lot of information which is questionable. And she's taken a leaf out of Durwood's page, and he's telling people, well, I gave a sworn statement to the RCMP. So her saying that apparently makes her credible, even though there's no evidence of that actually happening. We just have to take her word at that. But people seem to believe that because she's saying she gave a sworn statement to the RCMP, that she is therefore credible and believable. This person who's taken 10 months to come out, this person who's spent a lot of time talking about how she's got a brand new BMW, and who talks about credentials that to me are questionable when I look at her grammatical errors in messages that she's shared with other people that they've sent to me just quietly in the background. But it seems that people are giving her credibility because she has chosen a content creator and she has chosen Belinda and assured both of them that basically she's given statements to RCMP, which is this assurance that, hey, I'm credible because I gave a sworn statement to RCMP, so I can't be lying to you. And because they have credibility, she's basically gaining credibility from them thinking she's credible, if that makes sense. I have questions about this woman, particularly given that I caught her in a lie, and her response was to ghost me and then send me a piece of audio from Mike Darman's channel that was Janie speaking that had nothing to do with anything whatsoever. So again, we have more misinformation coming out. And the issue here is that now we're getting people saying, well, things she said contradicts things that Cindy said, and she is allegedly in cahoots with Wade, and all these stories are growing simply from what we've heard that Cindy said and from what we've heard stated by this Anita woman. Two lots of statements that are just growing a life of their own. Now I'm going to go back to talking about Cindy, because that is the bulk of what is at play here. But I did want to bring that up at that point where we had Wade literally saying that him and Cindy had been to the house to pick the children up, and that's why they had to do a polygraph exam.
And he didn't like her kids at all. But she said they beat them. Look at the dirty fucking house. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I may stay one night and I say,
I know, brother.
we can't live here. And 3 months ago, we told her, before that happened, I'll say 3 months before May, we had the U-Haul truck to move her back to her grandmother's house. We had a big house by Red Cliff and Bible Hill. The day before, no, I'm not moving. Why do you want to stay here? There's rats in the walls. CPS should have took the kids out. This was in December. Why would she stay there? If someone's beating my kids, I'm breaking their fucking legs. She should have told us anyway. She had told us he's on drugs. Or he's beating the kids. They would have been here. You get what I'm saying? We would have took the kids ourselves.
So I mentioned Chinese whispers at the start of this video, and this is a classic example of just what I'm talking about. So we have all, for months and months, been saying they took a U-Haul in to remove Malaya and the children because of Daniel being abusive. And this story was backed up by Durwood's narrative, which incidentally came out around the same time. But here's the thing. This is something that's been misinterpreted, and clearly I misinterpreted it too, but in my defence, this audio came out in August after all the Durwood audio had been spreading around. So we'd already heard Durwood claiming that they had tried to get them out of there because they knew that Daniel was being abusive. So we listened to this audio of Wade saying they took a U-Haul to get her out of there, and we put our own interpretation on it. We thought he was saying that they took a U-Haul in there to remove her and the children because of Daniel. But he didn't actually say that explicitly. He started by talking about how filthy the house was and how it's somewhere where he wouldn't even stay one night before he was like, got to get out of here. And from that, he moved on to talking about the U-Haul, getting this U-Haul, and Malaya at the last minute saying, I'm not going. And then he went back to talking about the house being unsuitable and saying that there were rats in the walls. Now, he did after that say that Daniel beat her and the children, but he explicitly said, had we known about that, we would have gotten them out of there. So we have, for months and months, got this audio confused because of the narrative that Durwood was putting out, and believed that them going in for the U-Haul was because of Daniel being abusive. But when you actually put it in context, when you notice that what he's talking about before and directly after talking about the U-Haul is about it not being suitable living conditions, being rats in the walls, and not clean. So it actually seems quite viable that the decision was made to remove the kids and Malaya and potentially Daniel because it was impacting on the children's health. Now, I saw a comment by Chelsea that if we go with this story from Cindy that they were going to get them out because of the children's health, that is actually also going with one of Daniel's stories that is backing up Daniel's story about the children always being unwell and that's why they were missing school. And that turns around and essentially makes him being truthful as opposed to him lying. My take on this is basically that Daniel still lied. I don't believe that the children missed that much school because of being unwell. I believe that there were probably many instances when those children had black eyes or very visible bruises or visible injuries and were kept home for that reason. Based on what we know about that household, I wouldn't be surprised if there were also many occasions when the children missed school just because Malaya couldn't get herself organised enough to get the kids ready and get them on the bus. That said, when we look at the way the baby looked not long after those children went missing, she did not look healthy. So I have no doubt that those children weren't being fed properly, that they weren't living in a healthy environment, and certainly if there were rodents in the wall, that's not healthy. If the only heating they had was that big wood heater, then it's possible that they may have had a cold bedroom, which would also not help them out in winter. So, yes, there could be an element of their health in terms of their absences. But with Daniel coming out and saying that's why they missed a lot of school, that would have only been one reason out of multiple. And I think the reason why we have Cindy and Wade saying, hey, we wanted to do this because of their health, is because I would imagine that for some reason their attendance got brought up in a discussion with Cindy and Wade, and Daniel's excuse got hauled out. Whether it was hauled out by Daniel, because we know that he did spend time with the children at Cindy and Wade's at one point in time, or whether it is just a narrative that him and Malaya had been pushing, and Malaya adopted his narrative, because we know that they were sharing a narrative after the children went missing. So logically for her, it's the most convenient one also in terms of why they are missing school. She's not going to say they're missing school because Daniel beats them. She's not going to say they're missing school because I couldn't be bothered getting out of bed and getting ready to get out on the bus that early. So she is going to go with Daniel's story. That doesn't make it truthful. That just means that that is the most convenient story, and it is probably the story that Cindy was told. So I could imagine Cindy being told, yeah, they get sick a lot, and Cindy has gone, okay, well, look at the condition the house is in. I think they get sick a lot because of the house, so we want to move them out. Now, this is still very problematic for me. First of all, like I've said, Malaya's family didn't like Daniel. they didn't get along with Daniel. Daniel was in Malaya's ear in the background by the sounds of it, basically trying to create friction between her and her family. So I find it very unlikely that they would have considered having Daniel move into Paddy's place. But then I guess as a grandmother, if your grandchildren, or great-grandmother I should say, if your great-grandchildren are unwell and putting up with your granddaughter's partner for a bit longer, for the sake of your great-grandchildren's health, then maybe you would consider it. But it does seem problematic to me that they would consider moving Daniel into Paddy's place with Malaya and the children. And if the house was already on the market, or if Paddy was at that point where she was ready to sell the house, it seems like a very bad choice to bring young children into a house that you were wanting to sell. So I do struggle with this notion of that's what the U-Haul was for. Now, the other thing with that is that Wade offered up, in this discussion with Tind, he offered up, well, we didn't know this was happening. Had we known this was happening, we would have gotten them out of there. And yet, at the same time, he's made other comments like, the first thing I said when the children were missing was that he did it. He's made comments about how Daniel would get his son to beat up Jack. He's made comments about Lily being touchy in terms of if he put his hand near her, she would flinch away. So this statement that he offered up of them not knowing anything and that they would have done something actually doesn't ring true to me. So is it possible that actually Cindy and Wade both lied? Is it possible that while Wade was talking about the U-Haul in terms of the conditions there were disgusting, is it possible that one of the considerations there was concerns over the welfare of the children relating to Daniel, and that it's just not something that was explicitly mentioned at the time, because he's there saying, had we known that there was a problem, we would have got them out. And this is something he said directly after talking about the U-Haul and directly after talking about the conditions of the house itself. So it makes me question, is this a two-sided thing? Was the whole point of bringing in the U-Haul because A, they felt it was not a safe environment physically for the children because of Daniel, but B, because they felt it was an unclean environment and that was impacting the children's health? But you know what? Either way, this comes back on Cindy. Because as someone working in the medical profession, I don't know if she is a nurse or if she's just no, I shouldn't say just, but if she's an RN or not like a fully nurse. I'm hearing different stories, but then again, these stories allegedly come from this Anita woman, so I don't know. But either way, she's in a position of being a mandatory reporter. They considered the living conditions to be poor enough that they wanted to move them out of there. Well, doesn't that make that something that should be mandatory reporting level? If children are living in a house where their health is being compromised, then that is a welfare concern. That is something that she should have reported. As a mandatory reporter, that is something on that level that she should have reported. So if this U-Haul story is being changed to hide the fact that they knew that there was abuse going on in the house, well, it is still a form of abuse, keeping children in a house where the living conditions are such that their health is severely compromised. If Malaya said she wasn't going, then yes, the situation should have been reported to CPS. And if CPS didn't remove the children, knowing that the conditions in the house were causing health issues, then it's on them. Now, going back to this story that's come from Cindy and the question of why. Why now, 10 months on? And why is it coming out now in this way? Now, I would like to know from Shenanigans if this statement that she made on her live stream is because this is the way Cindy presented it to her, or if this is a conclusion that she has come to herself. Because after giving the story of why the U-Haul was gotten and saying that they got the U-Haul because they thought the children's health was compromised, we get this statement. So all the people that were out there saying, you know, she had that opportunity to leave, and why didn't she just go in the U-Haul? That's not what the scenario was. If this idea has come directly from Cindy, that tells us why she's come out now and why she's sharing this story. Is this to take the heat off Malaya for remaining in that situation where her children were being abused and doing nothing about it? Because here's the thing. It doesn't excuse her. Even if the U-Haul was because the living conditions were bad and they felt that that was causing issues with the children's health, as a mother, shouldn't that have been enough for her to go, yeah, let's get out of here for the sake of the children? But even take the U-Haul out of the situation completely, it doesn't matter what the U-Haul was for. She was living in an environment where her children were being injured. They were getting black eyes. And she was looking the other way and chose not to leave him. So, you know what? This U-Haul story, this isn't that important. This is an attempt to deflect from the main issue here. The main issue here is that these children were living in a house where, at the very least, Jack was being physically abused. And their mother watched that happening and chose to do nothing. Yes, I understand that in a situation where you have DV, where you have coercive control, that it is very, very hard for someone to leave. But you know how many women there are out there who say, for me, the final straw that got me out there was when he raised a hand to my child. So here's the thing. Cindy, by being in an alliance with Cheryl, automatically loses credibility, in my opinion, because we know that Cheryl has lied to protect Malaya. So when you have Cindy and Cheryl pairing up to talk to a YouTube content creator when everyone's been silent for 10 months to spin a narrative, then how do we know that they are being truthful? We know that on Daniel's side of the family, all these stories that are coming out, most of them aren't truthful. You look on social media, YouTube, Facebook, there's all these fake accounts which are very clearly connected to one or other side in this situation. I've looked at things on Facebook where I've said, that sounds like someone who is coming out for Malaya. There are countless sock accounts that are there just to put out information for one side or the other. There are countless AI videos popping up with information that's just BS. And we have all these people coming out of the woodworks talking to content creators, spinning a yarn that is being given credibility because YouTube creators are saying, I trust this person. What we need to do here is just completely do away with all that. If it's not verified information, if we do not have receipts for it, we need to throw it out. Because you know what is important here? We need to remember the facts. There are 2 children that are missing right now. Jack was 4 when he went missing. Lily was 6 when she went missing. Lily's birthday is coming up in less than 3 weeks. She should have been turning 7 on the 22nd of March. These are facts. These are things that we know. We know with a fair degree of certainty those children aren't in the woods. We know with a fair degree of certainty, with almost 99% certainty, that they were not abducted. Sadly, it seems almost certain that they are deceased. These are things that we know. These are things that haven't been given to us by randoms who've popped up and spoken to a content creator or who've made comments on Facebook. These are bits of information that have come to us from the documents from the RCMP, from statement analysis. These are tangible things that we can base our understandings on. Another fact is that there were at least 3 adults on that property when those children went missing. We need to get back to holding those adults accountable. We need to get back to looking at facts. We need to get back to looking at things that we have receipts for, not gossip. Because at the end of the day, when there's no receipts for things, then it's either gossip, it's hearsay, it's rumours, it's all the same sort of stuff. It's nothing that is going to help us understand what happened to Lily and Jack. It is not something that is going to get us any closer to justice for Lily and Jack. It is just going to spread confusion and distract people from what really matters. And while we're thinking about these people coming out of the woodwork and sharing their version of the story, consider this. Everyone on Malaya's side has been silent for close to 10 months now. What has changed? Why all of a sudden are they coming out and speaking? Is it because they are fed up with what's being said? Because the thing is, since we heard about Daniel's charges, he's gone quiet. So they can't be coming out in response to Daniel because he has essentially been silenced. And if it wasn't these people coming out, who else would be speaking right now? We have a bit of audio that's being shared from Mike Darman of Janie, but there's nothing new in that. Durwood's pretty much gone quiet because he got basically proven to be an absolute liar. Someone who's basically hedging his bets and playing both sides. So why? Why would Cindy need to come out now? Why would Cheryl need to come out now? Why would this Anita woman need to come out now? I'm going to tell you why. It's got nothing to do with Daniel saying anything. It's got nothing to do with people pushing the narratives that are being pushed. Because if anything, those things have died down. Daniel is speaking less, which means there is less of that crap going around. Because that is the origins of most of the stuff that was going around. The thing that has changed is that in December, we had Rob McCammon come out and do an interview which pretty much made most people believe that we were in a situation where we were going to see a resolution for this case. That made people believe that we were going to see arrests happening. And then in January, Daniel was arrested on these charges. And many people have said, not just me, many people have said, this is a classic strategy that you see in so many cases like this, where they haven't got to the point yet where they can make arrests over this case, the missing children's case. So what they are going to do is build a foundation based on other charges. Because a conviction for the things that he is being charged with will be relevant when it comes to prosecuting for Lily and Jack. It creates a history of violence. It creates a history of abuse. And based on what's been said by the RCMP, sadly it seems like that is what we're looking at in terms of what happened with Lily and Jack. So the thing that has changed is that we now have this sense that justice is coming, that arrests are going to be made. And no matter how many times Malaya puts out little written statements that make it sound like she has no clue what happened to her children, no matter what Cheryl and Cindy say in terms of making it sound like their whole side of the family is just clueless, completely have no idea. At the end of the day, when those children were reported missing, up until the point in time when Malaya got in the car with Cindy and left that property, her and Daniel were telling the same story. They were contradicting each other with their story, but it was still the same story. And it was so clearly fabricated. They didn't even know which roles they were meant to take. So you had them both taking identical roles when it should have been a situation of this is how one person experienced it, this is how another person experienced it. The stories shouldn't have been so similar. The roles shouldn't have been identical. You can't both have woken up and then woken your partner and said, "Do you hear the children?" You can't both have been the person who was aware of them being in and out. Well, maybe you can. Except the way they both told it was way too similar. Their stories shouldn't be that similar. There are contradictions and inconsistencies in their stories. All three of them. Every single one of those people, or at least those three people who were on the property when these children went missing, know what happened. Malaya knows what happened to her children. She's been hiding out for 10 months and the people around her have allowed her to stay silent. And now, suddenly, when it looks like arrests are going to be made, Malaya is still hiding out and staying silent, but suddenly the people around her are speaking. To me, that seems like they are going into damage control, and this is all designed to try and prevent her from being arrested. I think what is important here is that we have to remember what is the important thing here, and the important thing here is Lily and Jack. And we have to question when people with connections to these children are coming out and telling stories. We have to question their motivation. Why are they coming out? And when those people have been silent for 10 months, why are they coming out now? I know there's a lot of people following Jack and Lily's case who have probably not looked at true crime stuff before, don't know how these things usually come down or these things usually happen. So for those people not being given receipts for the information that's being shared to them may not seem like a big deal. For those of us who have covered multiple cases or followed multiple cases, the need for receipts is something that we understand as being super important, because you always get people who come out of the woodworks with all sorts of stories to share, whether it's because they do have a connection with the people who are involved or because they just want attention. But the thing is, if you've not got receipts, you don't know if this information that you are being told is truthful. You don't know if this information is a distraction from what we should be looking at. So, did Wade lie about the U-Haul? No, it sounds like his story isn't too far from Cindy's. Did they both lie about the U-Haul? Was it just because they thought that the children were unhealthy in that house? Or was there more to the story? Does it really matter? Maybe to some extent it matters. But at the end of the day, what matters is Lily and Jack. What matters is that people did let them down. People did see the bruises. People did realise that they were having health issues, by the sounds of it. And yet nobody thought to step things up and try and make a change for these children. And now we have all this misinformation swirling around. We have information that we don't know where it came from. We don't know how truthful it is. And we just need to focus on Lily and Jack. We need to focus on the things that we do have receipts for. The things that are tangible. We need to focus on the things that actually will help us to understand what happened to Lily and Jack, to understand what their life was like before they went missing. On the things that just might get us closer to seeing justice for these children. Now, I know this has been a really long video, but this was something that I thought it was really important to address, because it feels to me like things are at the point of being where they're just about to get out of control, where we are just about to hit a point where there is so much misinformation swirling around that nobody has any idea what's going on, and people are going to lose interest in this case because they're going to look at it as being just another situation like the Summer Wells case, where you have 20 different people who nobody really knows who they are, unless they've been following every single YouTube channel, because these people aren't directly connected to the case but think they are. Anyway, I've gone on for way too long, and I've probably only got like 5 people still listening. I know when I get on these rants it probably becomes tedious, but it was something I had to get off my chest. It has been bothering me, the escalation of misinformation, the escalation of people coming out of the woodwork with stories that can't be verified. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Hopefully people understand where I'm coming from with this. So on that note, thanks for listening. Please hit the like button. If you've got this far through, then I can't have done something too bad. So please hit that like button. And please leave a comment for me. Let me know your thoughts on all this. Have I just confused you even more? Am I way off base here? Let me know. So on that note, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.